Coach Robert here. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a game that I played recently in a chess.com tournament, a daily tournament. That means that instead of having to make your moves within like a few minutes, you have days to make your moves. So I've been playing in this daily tournament for probably a little over 2 years now. It was a big tournament called Mars Attack. Had several hundred people involved. And you start by getting in a group of, I think, 10 or 11 players, and you play everybody in your group twice. The top 3 players move on to the next round. We are now in the 3rd round. I won both of my first 2 groups, and so we're in the 3rd round now. And I wanted to show this game because it shows the difference between when somebody plays really good, solid, sound openings and when somebody doesn't, and how hard it is to play if you don't play the sound openings. And so one of the things to keep in mind is with your openings, there are 3 things that I teach my kids all the time. Number 1, control the center. All right, you want to put pieces in the center, you want pieces that attack the center. If you control the center, you control the board. Number 2, develop your pieces. All right, you can't fight a battle with one soldier. So you want all of your pieces involved. They help each other, they work together, they coordinate, and they control more of the board when all of your pieces are developed. And number 3, king safety. Castle your king, put it safe in a corner. If most of the pieces are strongest in the center of your board, that means they're weakest at the corner of the board. So that's where you want your king, where everybody's pieces are the weakest. And so in this game, I played a good opening. My opponent, I would say, did not, and ended up paying the price for it in the end. I'm probably not going to go through the whole game here. There were some chances where he may have come back towards the end where I, made a not a great decision, but he never was winning in this game. Okay. The first move was c4. All right, so if you have been working with me, you know that I do not teach kids to start with c4. I teach them e4 or d4. Those are usually really good openings, putting a pawn right in the center, controlling the center. But what is interesting about this is c4 still controls the center, right? But instead of controlling it from the center, you control it from the side. It also means that when my knight comes to c3, it's not going to be blocking the c2 pawn. So it's basically getting an extra piece controlling and attacking the center. But generally, unless you know how to play c4 openings, you probably don't want to use those. That's something I've played a lot. I like to use it because not a lot of people play this. This is called the English opening. Now, when you play the English, the d5 square becomes really important because if you're going to have your knight on c3, then the c3 knight will be attacking d5. You've got this pawn on c4 attacking d5, so it becomes a really important square through the game. So let's see how my opponent responded. He responded with e6. Okay, that seemed like a weird move. Usually I see players play e4, e5 or c5, and I even sometimes see players play d5, but I don't think I'd ever seen anybody play e6. So I thought maybe he's going for like a French sort of thing, except for where my pawn is on c4 instead of e4. Well, I wasn't really sure what he was doing, so I went ahead and played knight to c3, going ahead and putting extra eyes on that square. I know that would if he did play d5, we'd have I'd have 2 attackers on d5, and he'd have he'd actually have 3 defenders, the pawn, or 2 defenders, the pawn and the queen. So I wouldn't want to trade there, but at least I could maybe get rid of one of the central pawns. But he didn't. He played d6. Okay, well, like I said, this is the 3rd round. That means I'm playing the winners of the winners. So maybe this guy knew a trap that I didn't think of. So that's what I'm worried about. So I keep with my plan. If you're going to give me the center, I'm going to take it. So I put a pawn on d4. At this point, if he wanted, he could transition into a kind of Queen's Gambit sort of game where he's behind a move. But instead, he played another pawn, g6. Okay, So, you know, I've seen this before where like kids will play all of their pawns one space forward. That is not a good way to play. And I was getting a little worried because this guy won 2 rounds. How is he playing all of his pawns? No piece development, no piece development at all. He's not, I mean, he's not even making his king safe. He's already moved a pawn that would be in front of his king. I'm just going to keep developing, keep getting my pieces out, and there goes another pawn. What is going on with this guy? All right, so again, I'm not sure. Maybe there's some sort of trap. I don't see anything. This just like looks like bad opening play. I move e3. Maybe should have gone straight for e4 since it was available. I was just yeah, I just wasn't sure where he was going with these pawns, and I just wanted to play a wait and see sort of thing. He gets the bishop out, so I developed my bishop. Thinking I wanted a little bit more active here along this diagonal. It does block the protection of the D pawn from a queen, but I still like it on that open diagonal better. And pawn number 5. He is 3 pawns away from moving all 8 of his pawns. Generally, my thought is you should be castling somewhere between move 5 and move 8. If 5 of your first 6 moves are pawn moves, you're not ready to castle. Well, I was, so I went ahead and castled. There we go. Look, take a look. I have controlled the center. I've got pawns in the center, pawns controlling the center. I've got knight controlling the center. I've got another knight controlling the center. I kind of own the center of the board, I would say. And he does not. I have pieces developed. I've got 3 of my pieces on the 3rd rank. He has 1 piece on the 2nd rank, and all the rest of his pieces haven't moved. Castling, so that's number 3. I have castled. So I've fulfilled all 3 of my goals in the opening, and he's fulfilled 0 so far. Okay, so he moves a knight. All right, well, he's getting ready to castle maybe. Since I've already got my opening done, I'm thinking, all right, I control the center. Let's get a rook in the center and let's start thinking about bashing through the center since I'm controlling it. He plays d5. All right, I could go ahead and trade c pawns, but that would kind of defeat the purpose of having that c pawn there. I want to trade my c pawn for his d pawn and have more central control. So I'd rather not exchange here. I'd rather see him exchange with me. So I bring up my b pawn so that if he does, I still have a pawn on c4. Oops, wrong arrow. There we go. I think he saw that, so he went ahead and castled. And I was like, well, if you're not going to take on c4, then I'm going to push and break open on the e-file, like I had planned when I moved my rook over. He says, okay, I will take that. So I take back with the knight and bring the rook up, thinking, okay, now I've got pieces developed, my bishop, my knight, my rook. He has, well, nothing developed. He does have this bishop on the long diagonal, and it does have this eye on my rook, but it's not doing much else. And so my thought is, well, now it's time to attack. I've got develop. I've got 1 bishop pointed towards the king side. I've got 2 bishops pointed towards the king side. I've got a knight coming in on the king side. I've got a queen ready to come in on the king side. I've got my rook ready to come in on the king side. I would not like to be him in this position. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be him. Or her. I don't know if it was a guy or girl. Based on the name, I kind of suspected it was a guy. He starts bringing his other knight. He needs pieces over on the king side. So that's what he's thinking. Let's get this knight coming over here, and to replace that knight that I just traded off. Now I see this pawn, and it's just kind of weak, and I want to get my rook over. I do want to get my rook over and get some attackers on this pawn. but I'm a little worried about some sort of tactic that, you know, like if he pushes here, I can't take, because if I took, then the bishop gets my rook. But if I leave it alone, then he'll take me, and I didn't like that idea, so I made a move, rook b1. This is something called prophylaxis, where you make a move that doesn't really do anything right at the time, but it prevents your opponent from having an attack. So they might not be doing anything yet, they may not have been using a tactic, but by moving my rook over to b1, there are no tactics along the long diagonal. There's no way that bishop's ever going to attack that rook now, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. And so now that I don't have to think about it anymore, I can return my focus over here. So he finishes getting that knight over, and now I go ahead with the plan. And I was thinking about it, that I figured this is really easy to counter. He can just move the pawn forward, right? And that's what he does. But I kind of like that, because that means I can start blockading everything. See, he's got this pawn chain here. Pawn chains are great because they support each other, but it also means that the squares in front of them are weak. The pawns can't do anything about the squares in front of themselves. All right, so here we go. I move the bishop over onto the open square. Now take a look at this. If you don't know what this is called, or why don't you pause the video? What is this sort of tactic called, where the knight can't move, because if it does, the bishop takes the queen? What kind of tactic is that called? See if you remember. Did you remember that it's called a pin? All right, so we talked about several tactics, and a lot of them are named after sharp, pointy objects. This one is named after a pin. I have pinned the knight to the queen, and so my opponent did not like that pin and moved the queen out of the way. And so I continue just blockading all of these pieces, these pawns. So I'm claiming as much space. The queen comes in, and my next move is not a great move. I'm really disappointed in my next move. I think it was about 1 o'clock in the morning when I made the move. And when I woke up in the next morning, I was, the first thing I thought in the morning was, why did I do that? That wasn't very smart. Okay, so here's what I was thinking at 1 o'clock in the morning. You should not play chess at 1 o'clock in the morning. I was like, oh no, my pawn's hanging. I need to protect it. Is my pawn hanging? No, my pawn is not hanging. There's a rook right there. I don't know what I was thinking. So anyways, I dropped my knight back. That was not the right move. That was not the right move at all. The right move was c5. Attack the queen. And if the queen steps down, bring the bishop up. And what's that queen going to do? That's getting messy in there. Okay, so that's not what I did though. I moved my knight back, and now he is trying to fix his position. So he was all tied up. The bishop was doing nothing. The pawns aren't going anywhere. He's like, okay, if I can just trade some pieces, I'll be fine. So let's see if I can trade that knight for the bishop. And then if the knight recaptures, he's got 2 attackers on this pawn right now. So if the knight goes to recapture, I'm going to lose the pawn. So he's trying to fix the position. I was like, okay, well, I can buy one more turn by going ahead and attacking the queen like I planned. The queen steps back. Now, I want my knight back on this square on e5, but I can't do it now. A couple moves ago, remember that knight, his knight was sitting on f6. And so my knight was not under attack from the bishop. But now the knight's not there, and I can't bring my knight back, because if I do, the bishop is just going to take it. So instead, I need to get this bishop out of the way. And so I scoot it back. F4 might have been a better spot for it. And then he plays a5. really not sure what he's doing over with a5. Maybe he's thinking a4 capture and bring in another attacker, get another rook, looking at my d4 pawn. But honestly, if he pushed a4, I would just push b4 and lock everything down over here so I can continue to ignore the queen side. I'm not interested in the queen side. I want to go get his king. But that also gave me some time. I went ahead and continued improving my pieces. So now I've got the queen and the bishop pointed at the g6 pawn. I've even got ideas of sacrificing the bishop there, because let's say if the let's just have another random movie. All right, let's say he moves here, then maybe take this, take this, take this. The rook's coming in soon. The knight's coming in soon. The bishop can come in first. I've got 4 attackers over here. The rook can swing over really quickly. It looks like it's falling apart for him. But that's not what he did. Instead, he moves his knight back. And that's great for me. I can go ahead, now that the knight's blocking the bishop, I can put my knight back on e5 where I wanted it. He puts his queen back on d8, and I put the pin back. Hey, this is exactly what I wanted if I could just undo that 1 o'clock in the morning move. All of his pieces are blocked in. It's even better because now I've got the queen and bishop on the diagonal, ready to jump in. So this was great. At this point, the computer, okay, we have both taken a knight and a pawn. That's all that's come off the board, is 1 knight, 1 pawn for both of us. The computer evaluates this between 2 and 3 points. I'm almost a full piece up according to the computer. Take a look. This bishop, his bishop on c8, never moved. Where's it going? What's it doing? Nothing. It has no prospects. All right. This bishop over here on g7, what's it going to do? Nothing. It has no prospects. Right. This knight is pinned because of the bishop. No prospects. With this pawn and this bishop here, this rook is blocked in. No prospects. His pieces are doing nothing. And I get to just take my time developing my pieces, getting them into better positions. If I want, I can swing my rook over and bring it in. I can try to bust some things open with a pawn push. There's all sorts of things that I can do, and he's just stuck. So this is what happens when you play a sound opening and your opponent doesn't. You get to lock their pieces in, prevent them from developing, and then go attack. Eventually what happened was he tried some bad ideas where he forgot that en passant was a thing. Eventually I ended up trading that passed pawn and a couple of rooks to get another passed pawn that I ended up able to march down the board, and he had to give up his last rook to stop me from queening. And I went on to, and right after he gave up that second rook, I was up a rook and a bishop to a bishop. I had extra pawns, and so he resigned at that point. So this is what it looks like when you play a good solid opening. Control the center, develop your pieces, protect your king. Once you have those 3 things done, attack, attack, attack. Just go after them. Especially if you're able to do the opening well and your opponent's not. That's what happened in this game. It was probably a lot more fun for me than it was for my opponent. I do have respect for this opponent. I played him in another game, and he had good chances in that game, and played a very, very tricky end game. I had the advantage, but he kept laying trap after trap after trap, and I finally won that one as well. But again, I'm playing winners of winners, but sound chess is still all it takes. So play good openings, control your opponents, win your games. All right, have fun. See you next time.